Hello and welcome to the Project Hope podcast for families and friends with a loved one in a group of high demand, high control. I am your host, Jennifer. A lot has changed since I first started this podcast, so I thought I'd add a little to the initial introductions and provide something that's more up to date. I work with survivors of coercive control one-to-one. I also consult with families, and I offer education to the public around such topics. For the full scope of what I offer and also my credentials, you're welcome to check out my website, jennifer-french.com. I have a master's in the psychology of coercive control, and as of August 2024, I've been accepted into a PhD program called Psychology, Policy, and Law, and I'll have a specialty in either criminal behavior or forensic victimology. This will support the work that I currently do as an expert witness in cases involving coercive control. The Project Hope podcast has provided such an amazing opportunity for me to meet many wonderful people, survivors, experts, family members, and it's truly a pleasure to meet each one of these individuals you will hear from. This podcast will conclude with season 2 as I enter into my PhD program, but I have many other exciting things on the horizon, so please stay in touch and go to my website for any and all current events. Thanks to all of you who listen to Project Hope and care about this community. You may recognize Debbie Pitney's last name because you may have already heard the Project Hope podcast episode with Joel Pitney, her son, or Laura Pitney, her daughter-in-law. Just thought I'd help connect the dots for you all. I'm especially excited for this podcast episode for a few reasons. Firstly, Debbie is the first parent and family member with a loved one in a group of high demand that I've had the opportunity to interview. So for any others of you out there and open to being on the podcast, please do contact me. And all that information, of course, is in the podcast notes. But secondly, Debbie is not just a mother, but also served as a United Methodist minister for 40 years. So you'll hear in this interview how this plays out in her story. Debbie is currently retired and living in Bend, Oregon with her husband, John. She enjoys spending time with her family, which includes Joel and Laura and her grandchild. She also reads to children through the Smart Reading program. She makes quilts to give away. And she is in the process of planning together with John as they build a net zero house in Bend. Very cool. And especially for those family members and friends with loved ones close to your heart who are in such groups, I hope you find that our discussion leaves you feeling not so alone. Please enjoy the listen. Well, Debbie Pitney, thank you so much for joining us on the Project Hope podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, so I thought that we would begin by people have an idea about a little bit of your history. And of course, Joel has been on the Project Hope podcast. But we're really here today to talk about your experience as Joel's mother and what it was like for you as he began to engage more with Andrew and with EnlightenNext. And kind of guide us through a little bit about sort of what was going through your mind and sort of the progression into maybe something's not quite right here.
Okay. Well, when Joel first began to talk to us about EnlightenNext, it was really kind of through the magazine that he and his first wife were reading together, and they had gone to India on their honeymoon, and they had met this leader, this teacher that they wanted to spend more time with, and
that was Andrew.
That was Andrew.
Oh, I didn't actually realize that they were in India.
They met him there in India, and through his wife's mother, who, and they were all in Rishikesh together. They were there at an ashram, and Andrew's group was in another area there. So they had met him. And then they came back, and they were actually living in Eugene, where we lived, and didn't have a lot of money. And it was before cell phones were real popular. So they would come over once a week to our house to use our phone for their 2-hour long lessons with Andrew.
Oh,
so they'd be locked back in the back room and on the phone on this teaching time. And every once in a while, when they'd come back out, they'd want to talk to us, or, you should hear this, you should see this. And we sat down a couple of times and listened to one of the teachings. And to us, it was nothing really radically new. I'm a ordained clergy. I'm a United Methodist minister. So is my husband. I've grown up with spiritual talk. And so Andrew would kind of put out that this was just the latest thing, that nobody had ever thought these thoughts before. And I remember at one point saying to Joel in a conversation, well, gosh, that theory sounds an awful lot like what John Wesley, who was the founder of Methodism, said was going on to perfection. So I'm not quite sure it's such a brand new thought, but he needed to believe it was. And
well, and isn't that part of the awakening process, kind of at that age when we're receiving spiritual teachings for the first time? I mean, it's just incredible. It's sort of an awakening.
Yeah. And so, we would, and I often say we, because it would be John and I together would be coming back and forth in these conversations. But mostly it was a way of saying, well, Joel is married now, and this particular spiritual expression is really what his wife grew up in, relating to a guru and having that kind of experience. And so while it wasn't my way, it's another way, and that was okay. And so my thoughts were at that point that it was best to just simply support him because it was a way of supporting him in his marriage, to say, this is who they are. I'd read the magazines when they came. It wasn't earth-shattering stuff to me. As is often is the case, it was very anti-Christian, but it was anti-evangelical Christian and lumping us all together. And I'm not an evangelical Christian. I am a very progressive Christian. And so I was being lumped into this category of people who weren't thinking and so that was a little frustrating. And I would always have to come back to that and say, well, that's not really who I am or who I raised you to be. And maybe Andrew needs to do a little work in his, before he's going to put out blanket statements about Christians, he needs to figure out who we really are.
Well, that's so interesting for you to share that, and kind of the insight around that is that essentially he's in a narrow view, and one could even stretch to say uneducated, to not understand some of these distinctions if you're about to criticize them.
Right. And I would say very uneducated.
Yeah.
Andrew would put himself off to be this know-all, and it was very clear from the readings that we did of his. He always had this thing in the magazine called The Pundit and the Guru. And the pundit would say something and then the guru would correct it. And, and it was most of the magazine. And I could find myself just arguing with the magazine.
Yes.
But I was Joel's mother. And so, and this is where he was, and this is what was important to him in his marriage. So I tried my best not to argue points.
Yeah.
Unless I had to.
Yeah.
When the Women's Issue magazine came out, all about how women were clearly unable to reach enlightenment and clearly not, and all the language was kind of higher and lower.
Yeah.
And when that came out, I couldn't keep silent. It's like, wait a second, higher and lower? Who raised you? So, we had to kind of agree to disagree on that.
Yeah.
So.
Right. And it's also incredible, what I'm finding interesting about, as I'm sort of visualizing this, Joel in the group, completely a part of it, you outside reading this, and all those messages that one receives within the group kind of clouding the ability to even understand or comprehend what perhaps you're presenting.
Right.
Because you're just so it's all been so, it's a sealed container, all those arguments within that mindset.
Right. I remember talking to him at one point and saying something about, you can't raise a question. You can't question a teaching, and saying, look, I'm a spiritual teacher. That's my profession. I preach every week. I teach classes all through the week. I'm a biblical scholar. And people can question me all the time. I encourage that I am questioned. And he was very clear that in Andrew's world, Andrew was the teacher and could not be questioned. He had the answers, and Joel was to learn them. And that was scary. That was scary for me to think about.
Yeah, scary and also wise from your standpoint. And also what's interesting is it's just so interesting, the difference there, of what's happening. Even, it just kind of shows you the power of that group think, and that essentially it was that exact point of not being able to question Andrew as teacher that brought him down.
Yeah.
Because people stood up and questioned.
Yeah. I remember, we visited the campus of EnlightenNext twice.
Yeah.
Neither time was Andrew there. And I think that was purposeful on Joel's part, so we walked through, and Andrew's picture everywhere, and Andrew's picture in their apartment, and all of that. And John and I would joke about it. We'd go back to the motel and joke about it and say, I wonder if we should have our pictures taken and given them, hand out to all of our parishioners. And walk in, and when we would walk into their homes, expect to find our pictures with candles around them.
I know. And I always have to kind of make my disclaimer when we're laughing about these things for our audience, because it's like funny, not funny.
Right.
But when you've actually been in it, it's like you kind of have to find these areas to just laugh about and joke about. Otherwise, it's devastating.
Yeah, because in no way, shape, or form would I ever want the people that were part of the congregations that I served for 40 years, ever want them to be worshiping me. Light a candle in prayer for me if I'm having a difficult time, or light a candle in celebration for me if something great is happening. But light a candle in front of me because I am somehow being worshiped, or fear they could never ask me a question about what I said, or that I could ever be wrong about something I said, about something I taught. Of course I was wrong. Of course they could question me. So it was a very odd place to be in light of my profession, and to have my child in this.
Yes. Oh, I am so grateful for your voice right now, Debbie. It's such a refreshing kind of air that I feel that I'm breathing right now, to have the perspective of somebody who also is, as you said, spiritually teaching and giving in that way, because I think both for the audience of family members as well as those who have come out of such organizations, it's very, it becomes very confusing what a non-abusive spiritual leader even looks like.
Yeah.
So thank you for describing that. So this is kind of, so as you're progressing in your experience, just things that are odd are popping up kind of here and there. And was there any time where, it's my assumption, you being so open to this, and kind of, it also sounds to me like you kind of made a decision to support Joel regardless in terms of what he was doing.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if there was kind of a time where that you and John, your husband, hit where you're going, do we do something? Active?
Yeah. It really, I think, began for us on one phone call when he called, and we were just chatting and catching up, and we didn't get to talk to him on the phone very often because he wasn't allowed to call us. And we always say it was really amazing that he did not disconnect from us. Wow. Because it was expected, I think, that he would. And he did not.
Debbie, sorry to interrupt. Do you, I mean, to me, just knowing you now, the little time that we've had together beyond this podcast and knowing Joel, do you think that that's a testament to your relationship and just a testament to Joel's?
I think it's a testament to Joel. I mean, obviously we raised him, and we have we've worked hard at being good parents. We weren't always good parents. We made mistakes, but it really, I believe, was a testament to Joel, that family was important to him then and is important to him now. And while Andrew was going to require all of his devotion, he wasn't willing to let go of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why when we were allowed to visit, it was always when Andrew wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting just knowing Joel, the little bit that I do. He has such a great mind. I feel like he is able to do something with his mind where he thinks outside of the box, and he's open to all the layers and complexities and different viewpoints. And if that's something in your core, maybe it actually stays there, even in these environments.
Right.
And of course, they talk about the person's essence never goes away in these groups, but then, the layers come in of the teachings that slowly
eat away
you. Yes.
Yeah.
And yet, what's interesting to me is that I also believe, I mean, this was the case in my own experience. I think there is just a really deep protective layer to ourselves that at times in those sort of isolated mind think experiences, there are just moments that we have where you just kind of have to break from that, and you almost
don't, like, for example, in my group, one of the silly small ones was that we really weren't supposed to be drinking coffee, that was bad. And I remember going through a phase where I kind of went, I don't think it's bad, so I'm just going to do it. And I didn't confess it afterward, because in my own mind and head, I kind of went, nope, that's just my own little thing that I get to do. And I didn't feel bad about it. Whereas if I had done something that I really felt bad about, I mean, I definitely could not have kept that in. We were really confessing and devoted to that element of the practice. But in this little category, so it's interesting, I think, how there are these tiny little categories that each of us who are in it can kind of get to. And this reminds me of one of those.
Well, so we were actually on the phone with him, and just checking in, how's life, what's going on, and then we asked him about how his wife was.
Yeah.
And he paused for a minute and he said, well, I'm not really spending much time with her. And it was like, what? And he said a little bit, well, she's struggling, kind of thing, and I'm not spending much time with it. And so we kind of let it go. But that was a clue.
Yeah.
Then right after that, the holidays were coming up, and they were coming to our home for Christmas. And they came on different planes. They were in different, and he talked a little about, yes, she's struggling again, that kind of language, and so we're struggling, but the encouragement was, well, what about going and getting some help? Going and seeing a counselor? Oh, well, no, we do everything within our group, so we're working, Well, it was clear. It was clear when they were with us that something wasn't right. And by the time, within a very short time after they left after Christmas, it became apparent that they were going to be, he let us know that they were going to be separating. Didn't say divorcing, but separating. And so it was at that point that we Googled Andrew Cohen. And instead of looking at what came up first, we started looking at what came up second and third and fourth and fifth.
Yeah.
And we got a hold of the books that had been written by former cult members.
Yeah. And
recognized in their words what was going on. It was at that point that we, being clergy, we have connections around the United States. And so we got in touch with United Methodist clergy that were from that area of Massachusetts and said, what do you know? What do you know about that thing that's on the hill outside your town? What do you know about? And the answers that we got were, well, it's just benign intellectualism. They're really not hurting anybody. They just like to hear themselves talk, and they don't help anybody. At that point there was some big flood going on, and they were on a hill and could have helped lots of people in the neighborhood, and they could have cared less. So we tried to surround we tried to learn what we could. And then we tried to decide whether or not we were going to go back, fly across the country and kind of surprise him. Yeah. and try and pull him out. We didn't. He got word that we were concerned and that we thought it was a cult. And how he got word is neither here nor there.
No.
But he flew to Oregon to talk to us.
Wow.
And we challenged him and said, it sounds to us like you were told to get a divorce. You were told to be separated. You were told, oh, no. None of that happened. No. This is all my own free will. I would have done it anyway. And it was a bunch of crap. I didn't believe it. But, so we had those conversations. And then we drove from Eugene to Portland to the airport, and he was up front and I was in the back. It was about time for him to leave, and he turned around and he saw that I was just weeping. And all I could do was hug him. And let him know that I didn't agree with what he was doing. I didn't agree with where he was at in his life, but I loved him. And I was simply that I couldn't argue with him anymore about Andrew's teachings or the lack thereof of teaching, that I was going to simply try to be his mom.
Yes.
The mom of a young man going through a divorce, and that I had to separate everything else out. I wasn't going to read Andrew's garbage anymore. We weren't going to talk about that kind of stuff anymore. But it felt like I was putting him on a plane to never see him again. That's what it felt like.
Yes.
I am delighted to offer you Pure Haven products. All proceeds received go right back to the Project Hope podcast. I myself have been using these pure, safe, and toxin-free products for over 4 years, and I absolutely love knowing that my home has countertops that my little niece and nephew can eat off of without worrying that they have a handful of chemicals being placed in their mouths. The cleaning products are some of my favorites. The glass and surface cleaners smell amazing as well. So if this is of interest to you, please go to purehaven.com/Jennifer French. The link is also included below with information about this podcast segment.
Oh my goodness. Really? And how beautiful that you even had the kind of wherewithal to be able in that moment under that duress to get in tune with what could possibly work. That you were essentially creating a new alliance with him as your son who was going through a divorce, and that the rest would be nothing in your mind, or, that it wouldn't be addressed. Yeah. So moving forward from there, were there other moments then that and I am curious actually, Debbie, because there was such a moment like this for you. I know even for myself, being on the inside, the struggle for me internally back and forth with drawing a line with my parents and then not being able to hold it and break it because the love surged up again. And then going and then speaking to the teacher and having them get me clear again that, yes, I needed to cut them off. And then I just couldn't do it again. And I personally went back and forth so many times. I wonder for you in your own kind of mental, emotional process, what were you able at that point to really kind of go, okay, I'm sort of leaving the whole Andrew Cohen thing out, and the goal now is to just maintain connection with my son.
tried to the best that I could. There was an opportunity. Andrew came to Vancouver, British Columbia, so not that far from Oregon, to lead some kind of teaching. And Joel was with him, and he invited us to come. And I would not go.
Yeah.
John went, and that's his story to tell. But I simply, I wrote it off and said, well, hey, it's on a weekend and it's in November, and that's right during the big, financial campaign in the church. There's no way I'm going to be gone on a Sunday. I work on Sundays. So I put it off at that. But there was absolutely no way that I was willing to sit and listen to Andrew.
Yes.
I was not willing to be in the same room with him. I had met him once when he was, when his band was playing at a bar back in Massachusetts. That's my only connection to the man, meeting him in person. And, at a bar, what are you going to talk about? We were all supposed to think he was such a great drummer. And it was like, you're a drummer. You're a drummer playing in a bar. But I was not, I was simply unwilling to put myself in that place, to have it be a tug of war between this man and me over my son.
Yeah.
And especially, I decided, especially as a woman, to where I had been in conversations with several of the other lesser teachers when we had been back in EnlightenNext, and they always, there was always a put down of me in my personhood. There was always, for this group that was supposed to be about letting go of ego, the egos among those leaders were huge. And so I made that decision that would not be healthy for me, nor would it be healthy for my relationship with Joel.
Yeah.
That I simply needed to say, nope. I realize you're within 500 miles of here, and I realize that you want me to listen to him, but I'm not going to.
Yeah.
So I didn't.
Yeah. And what a beautiful just honoring of yourself in that moment, and kind of a extraction from that whole influence and messaging and all of that. Oh, this is amazing, Debbie. I'm sure so many parents are relating to you right now.
Well, it was very interesting. It kind of, was one other time when Joel was in high school. There was a much more conservative Christian campus group, and I'm not going to talk about exactly who they were, but they were always trying to get new members.
Yeah.
And in order to be a part of that group, you had to go to this conservative Christian church on Sunday morning. And of course, Joel was like any other high school boy who happens to be heterosexual. He was very interested in the cute girls that went there. And so he wanted to go. And at the time, the community in which we lived, I would be in the newspaper on a fairly regular basis being interviewed for a very progressive stance on any controversial issue that was out there. So I was the United Methodist voice about acceptance and affirmation of gay and lesbian persons. I was the United Methodist voice that was speaking to whatever particular social issue at the time.
Yeah.
And I believe that the leadership of that conservative group knew that and knew who Joel was. And I remember having a conversation with him about that, yes, he could go, but he had to understand that the message he would be hearing would be diametrically opposed to who I was or what I was doing with my life and who his dad was. And he went, and the leader gave him a Bible, and wrote some inscription in it. And I could tell from that inscription that there was a power play. I'm going to get your son from you. I'm going to hold up him as a trophy kind of thing. And, it wasn't Joel's first Bible. He had other Bibles.
Yeah.
And that was the end. That really was the end of it. He never went back.
Yeah.
But because I don't know whether he even had the sense of, wait a second, this person is trying to, even though I'm a teenager and I'm not supposed to like my parents, he's saying something that isn't okay.
Yeah.
And so there were ways in which that little bit and then the Andrew thing kind of came together for me in my thoughts of, this person trying to get in and grab my son.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. So then as we return to the Andrew Cohen story again, is there any other moments kind of along the way that are significant before you kind of get the news that things are falling apart?
Yeah, no, it really happened pretty quickly after some of that. We began to recognize Joel would, when he talked to us, was talking about, well, maybe he would move to Boston and begin looking for some other kind of work, or that he was beginning to tire, I think, of what was going on. He still wasn't willing to understand his life was in a cult or that, but he was beginning to question, as were other leaders. And then things began to fall apart. And I mean, I know exactly where I was the moment the phone call came. We were in the process of getting our house ready to sell, and the phone rings. I'm painting a bedroom, and the phone rings, and, I've got paint all over, and Joel's on the phone saying, okay, you can say I told you so. It was a cult.
Wow.
And it's like, no need to say I told you so. Come home.
Yeah.
And he came home.
What a beautiful response, Debbie, because sometimes with the torture that families go through, that can't always be the response.
Yeah, no, we know how lucky.
Yeah.
We know how lucky we were and are.
Yeah.
And I mean, he called a few minutes ago. I live a mile and a half from him now. He calls all the time. He calls every day. He calls sometimes several times a day. And I'm still surprised, and I'm still blessed that he got out.
Yeah.
And that our relationship is intact. And in fact, he and his new wife must have been just a little over a year ago, asked us to move to Bend. Yeah. They had done the work together, talking about what it might be like if we were to move here. And John and I said, "Oh, no. We're not going to move to Bend." But one of the things that Joel said when he was asking was, said, I want to make up for some of those lost years.
Yes.
And I'm a recent cancer survivor. He had helped walk me through that, and I'm on the other side of that. And he has a beautiful little boy, and it was like, no, I want our family to be as close as we can possibly be. And then the pandemic came, and we said, oh, sure, let's move to Bend. So we did. But there he is. And we still have conversations about those years as they come up.
Yeah.
It's necessary for us to have conversations about them.
Yeah.
From his perspective of everything that was happening, from their perspective, because his wife was a member of the cult.
Yes. And Laura actually came on the podcast as well.
So, those conversations, they don't happen as often anymore.
Yeah.
Joel's writing a book about it. So he reads us chapters and the conversations come up. But I think he does get how hard it was.
Yeah.
And there is that sense that he wants to be with us for the rest of what we have left, and not at a distance. He wants to be up close and personal.
Yeah.
And that's a gift.
Yeah.
And I know it is a gift. It is not a gift that many parents receive.
Right.
I know that.
Yeah. Yeah, we can only hope. And I think one of the things that is significant also about your story with Joel is that organization crumbled. And so sometimes when that happens and somebody's leaving, you don't know kind of what the road to recovery looks like.
Yeah.
In the same way you might if they choose to leave.
That's right. Yeah. And what I think part of that was that I think Joel was sensing his need to leave before, as it was crumbling, or right in those beginning times. So it may be that it was easier for him to leave because of that, because he was already in the mindset of maybe this isn't what I want.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And then I have to believe that there just are these kind of gifts of clarity that come after you're out of that cloud, that substance that you're literally living and breathing in and having your being in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It really becomes that. And so we can also hope for that, that people come out, and even if it's not clear initially, that process is able to really unfold into clarity.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that's one of the things that I would say to anybody who's listening who is in something and has cut themselves off from their parents because of that. There are healthy reasons to cut ourselves off from our parents. And I don't want to ever say that if you cut yourself out from your parents, that's a horrible thing, because there are good choices that people make. But if you've been in a cult, contact your parents.
Yeah.
And to parents, I'd say don't give up. Don't close the door. If there's anything you can do to reconnect in some way, if it's a phone call, we would call. We would just call. We were across the country. We would call. We'd sometimes not hear back for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, get a response for that call. And then we'd make another phone call and leave another message just to say, we're here.
Yeah.
And while he knew we didn't agree with a whole lot of what was going on, we're here and we love you. And I think, so to parents, I'd say, don't give up. And if you feel like going in the middle of the night and cutting your kid out of there is the right thing, do it. Do it.
It's really interesting because, I've had parents ask me for advice around that. And of course, that move can backfire depending on what
Absolutely
you're in. But, I've also said I revisit this conversation with a couple parents. And at some point, I found myself saying something different where I kind of said, at this point, you're the one that has to live with your decision.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have to acknowledge that and feel the weight of that.
Yeah.
But at this point, what do you have to lose?
Yeah.
Because you haven't even heard from them or spoken to them now for 10 years.
Yeah. And if you can stand at their door and knock, and even if they don't if all they do is open the door a crack, at least you've seen their eyes and they've seen yours and they know that you love them.
That is...
And you're not going to let go. You're not going to let go. And I think that was true for us. And again, kudos for Joel, because he kept that door open, and we knew that we hadn't lost him completely.
Yeah.
And he did it at great risk.
Yeah. Yep. Amazing. Oh, Debbie. Well, a wonderful note to end on. I cannot even tell you how much I appreciate this conversation. My heart is full. I feel like this will help so many who listen, and I so appreciate your unique and amazing voice.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for letting me be a part of this, and thanks for the work you're doing. It's so important.
Yeah,
it is absolutely critically important, because there are way too many of our young adults, youth and young adults, who are being pulled away. And there are ways, and they need support, and their families need support.
Yeah.
So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you, Debbie. I have the feeling that for you family members in particular, there are likely so many elements of Debbie's experience that you've related to. Debbie encourages parents, of course, partners and loved ones, to have that lifeline out to the one in the group. And so I just want to acknowledge here how really tough that can be for many reasons. Perhaps it's been a long time and it's just taken a toll on you, or even your marriage or family relationships. It's often the case that this experience changes the entirety of family dynamics. In my case, for example, perhaps you can imagine how strange it must have been for my brother and parents to all of a sudden have me missing from every holiday we'd spend together, family trips and milestone events that I was not at. I missed deaths, births, unions, and just day-to-day moments when my mom or I would pick up the phone to just connect about what was up in that moment. If you haven't had this experience and you try it on, it won't take long for you to imagine the many ways that the family dynamic is affected. Sometimes one parent is more emotionally attached to the child in the cult, and this causes tension in the marriage, as with the level of despair, hopelessness, or anger that one individual might feel. And then there's the torturous feeling of just missing a loved one. Sometimes family members feel real shame, guilt, or a sense of failure. Sometimes there's a tremendous hatred toward the leaders of the group, and that can be quite shocking if you're someone not used to having those feelings. All of these experiences are very, very normal. Really, all feelings around this outrageous experience are normal. I've heard extremes of every kind expressed.
So I do just want you all to know that there are amazing resources available for help. There are people who are really wonderful and will work with you and your family to help get your loved one out of the group. They are often called exit counselors, and they work with you in a way that's collaborative and respectful of your desires and feedback regarding the person you're trying to help. In addition, there are wonderful counselors who are trained specifically to work with people surviving this type of extreme environment. And the very best hub for these resources is the International Cultic Studies Association. They also go by the acronym ICSA. You can find that resource at icsahome.com. And that resource, of course, will be in the podcast notes as well. Or if you have specific questions or need for direction, please always feel free to reach out to me, as I would be glad to connect you to helpful resources. And hopefully once I've completed my master's program, I will be a helpful counseling resource to those looking to heal from such groups and experiences of religious and spiritual abuses or trauma. So please know that help and support is available if you or someone you know needs it. And a huge thanks for Debbie for her time and perspective. I feel grateful to now have her as a friend and resource, and I so hope this has been a helpful episode for those of you suffering. May this be a little balm of hope to your hearts. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Project Hope podcast. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to subscribe and comment. You can always get in touch with me at jennifer-french.com. And please let me know any specific topics of interest. And of course, I'm always interested in your stories, whether you've left an organization of high demand, high control, or if you're an individual struggling with the knowing that someone you love is in such a situation. I am here for you. Think critically, take heart, and be free.